If the people making decisions behind closed doors were negotiating deals that could affect your future, would you be comfortable finding out about it after everyone else did? Because that's the question many golf fans are asking right now. What happens when one of the most powerful figures in professional golf is reportedly involved in private conversations with major sponsors, while players are left wondering where they fit into those discussions? Is it simply business as usual, or is there something much bigger happening behind the scenes? The most surprising part isn't that sponsors are involved. Sponsorships are a normal part of professional sports. It's the secrecy surrounding these conversations and the growing frustration among players that has captured everyone's attention. When trust, leadership, and money collide, even a private business decision can become one of the biggest stories in sports. Before we dive deeper, I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you enjoy uncovering the stories that don't always make the headlines, make sure to subscribe because there's always more happening in professional sports than most people realize. Some of the biggest controversies don't begin on the course, they begin behind closed doors. That is exactly why Brian Rolapp's name has suddenly become impossible to ignore. Leadership decisions in professional sports carry enormous weight, especially when they involve the people and organizations that help shape the future of an entire league. Brian Rolapp isn't a player competing for trophies or ranking points. His role places him much closer to the business side of the sport, where decisions can influence relationships between sponsors, players, and the organization itself. When someone in that position becomes connected to private discussions involving major sponsors, people naturally begin paying attention. The reason this story matters isn't simply because conversations took place. Private negotiations happen in sports all the time. What makes this situation different is the growing concern surrounding transparency and communication. Leadership is built on trust. Players want to feel informed, sponsors want confidence in the organization, and fans want to understand how important decisions are being made. Once questions about who was included in those conversations begin to surface, the entire discussion becomes much bigger than sponsorship deals themselves. Private negotiations are nothing unusual in professional sports. Organizations regularly meet with sponsors to discuss partnerships, financial opportunities, and long-term business strategies. Those conversations are often necessary to help grow the sport and strengthen its future. What has caught so many people's attention in this situation is not the idea of sponsors being involved. It's the perception that important discussions may have taken place without the level of transparency that many players expected. Sponsors play a significant role in modern sports. They don't simply provide financial support. They help shape tournaments, player opportunities, fan experiences, and sometimes even the direction an organization chooses to pursue. When leadership begins having private conversations with major sponsors, people naturally become curious about what is being discussed and how those decisions might eventually affect everyone involved. That curiosity becomes even stronger when players feel they may not have been adequately informed about conversations that could influence their professional environment. The debate quickly shifts away from sponsorship itself and moves toward a much larger question: who gets a seat at the table when important decisions are being made? At its heart, this story isn't about whether private meetings should happen. It's about whether the people most directly affected by those decisions feel they are being heard, respected, and included in the process. That is where player frustration begins to make much more sense. Professional golfers understand that sponsors are essential to the sport. They understand that business decisions must be made and that leadership has responsibilities that extend far beyond tournament schedules. What many players care about just as much, however, is transparency. When conversations have the potential to influence their careers, opportunities, and the future direction of the organization, they naturally want to feel included in the broader discussion. For many players, this isn't simply a sponsorship issue, it is a trust issue. Athletes dedicate years of their lives to competing at the highest level, helping build the value and reputation of the organizations they represent. Because of that, they expect important decisions to be communicated openly whenever possible. When information appears to emerge privately or unexpectedly, frustration can grow very quickly. The biggest concern isn't necessarily what was discussed during those conversations. It is whether players believe their perspectives matter when major decisions are being considered. Once trust becomes part of the conversation, emotions inevitably follow. Players aren't only thinking about sponsorship deals or business strategies. They are thinking about fairness, communication, and the confidence they place in the leadership responsible for guiding the future of their sport. That is also why understanding the role of sponsors is so important in this conversation. Sponsors are far more than companies placing their logos on banners or advertisements during tournaments. Their influence often extends into the growth, visibility, and financial success of professional sports organizations. Major sponsorship agreements can create opportunities that benefit everyone involved. They can help increase prize funds, improve tournament experiences, strengthen marketing efforts, and attract new audiences to the sport. In many cases, strong sponsor relationships are essential for long-term success. At the same time, sponsorship deals can influence priorities and strategic decisions within an organization. When leadership enters discussions with major sponsors, those conversations can potentially shape how resources are allocated and what direction the organization chooses to pursue in the future. That is why transparency becomes such an important part of the discussion. Players are not simply interested in whether sponsors benefit from an agreement. They want to understand how those benefits align with the interests of the people competing every week. The conversation becomes much more significant when sponsorship decisions are viewed not only as business opportunities, but also as decisions that may influence the future relationship between leadership, sponsors, and the players who make the sport possible. That is why situations like this can have consequences that extend far beyond a single sponsorship discussion. The PGA Tour's success has always depended on maintaining a balance between its leadership, its players, and the partners who invest in the sport. When that balance begins to feel uncertain, questions naturally arise about the organization's direction and priorities. Professional sports organizations are built on trust. Players trust leadership to represent their interests responsibly. Sponsors trust the organization to protect the integrity and reputation of the sport. Fans trust that important decisions are being made with transparency and fairness in mind. When concerns surrounding private conversations and communication become part of the public discussion, people begin paying closer attention to how leadership operates behind the scenes. Even when decisions are made with good intentions, a lack of transparency can quickly become just as controversial as the decision itself. For the PGA Tour, stories like this are about more than public perception. They are opportunities to reinforce confidence among everyone involved. Leadership decisions may happen privately, but their impact is often felt publicly. And when players begin asking questions, the entire golf world listens. It's about whether the people who are most affected by major organizational choices feel informed and valued throughout the process. Professional sports have always been built on relationships. Leadership depends on trust, players depend on transparency, and organizations depend on maintaining confidence among everyone involved. Once communication begins to feel uncertain, even routine business discussions can quickly become major talking points. I want to hear what you think about this situation. If important decisions could impact your career or future opportunities, would you expect to be consulted before those conversations moved forward? Or should leadership be trusted to make those decisions independently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're enjoying these deep dives into the biggest stories happening behind the scenes in sports, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss what's really shaping the game beyond the headlines. Trust is often tested most when difficult conversations happen behind closed doors. That idea sits at the center of this entire discussion. In professional sports, transparency isn't simply about sharing information. It is about making people feel that their voices matter when important decisions are being made. The moment people begin questioning how decisions are communicated, the conversation becomes much larger than the decision itself. Leadership carries responsibilities that go far beyond signing agreements and building partnerships. It also requires maintaining confidence among the people who help make an organization successful. Players want to believe that leadership is acting in the best interests of the sport. Sponsors want assurance that their partnerships are built on stability and trust, and fans want to feel that the organizations they support operate with integrity. What makes situations like this particularly interesting is that transparency is often noticed most when people believe it may be missing. Private conversations are not uncommon in business, but when those conversations have the potential to affect an entire community, expectations naturally become much higher. Sometimes controversies are not created by what happened. They are created by what people feel they were never told. Public perception can change very quickly when communication becomes part of the story. That is why this story has generated so much discussion throughout the golf community. It brings together several issues that people care deeply about: leadership, accountability, player relationships, and the future direction of one of the biggest organizations in professional golf. What makes this situation particularly compelling is that there isn't a single question at the center of it. There are several. Should leadership always keep players informed when important conversations are taking place? How much privacy should executives have when negotiating business opportunities? And where should the line be drawn between necessary confidentiality and organizational transparency? These questions extend beyond one individual or one sponsorship discussion. They touch on the larger challenge every major sports organization faces: finding the right balance between making strategic business decisions and maintaining the confidence of the people those decisions ultimately affect. Stories like this also remind fans that professional sports are shaped just as much by what happens in meeting rooms as what happens during competition. Decisions made away from the spotlight can influence relationships, priorities, and public perception in ways that are not always immediately visible. Perhaps that is why people continue paying attention. This isn't simply a conversation about sponsorships or negotiations. It is a conversation about how leadership earns trust and how organizations adapt when expectations surrounding communication continue to evolve. Sometimes the biggest developments in sports begin with a single unanswered question and grow into discussions that affect everyone connected to the game. That is exactly why this situation has become such a major talking point. The focus was never only about a sponsor conversation or a business decision. The deeper issue is what those decisions represent: the relationship between leadership, players, and the people who dedicate their careers to building the sport. Professional sports organizations operate in a complicated environment. They must create partnerships, make strategic choices, and continue growing financially. At the same time, they must maintain the confidence of the athletes and communities that make those opportunities possible. Finding that balance is not always easy. A decision made with the intention of helping an organization move forward can still create questions if the people affected by it feel disconnected from the process. That is why communication often becomes just as important as the decision itself. For the PGA Tour, situations like this highlight a challenge faced by many major sports organizations: how to move quickly in a changing business world while ensuring that the people at the center of the sport feel respected and included. For players, the issue is not simply about one conversation or one agreement. It is about knowing that their opinions and concerns matter when decisions are being made that could influence the future of the game they compete in. And for fans, stories like this offer a reminder that sports are not shaped only by what happens during competition. The direction of a sport is also influenced by conversations, partnerships, and decisions that happen far away from the cameras. Now, I want to hear your opinion. Do you think players should have a stronger voice in major business decisions that affect professional sports? Or should executives have the freedom to make those choices independently? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of the stories happening behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the moments shaping the world of sports.